Ahoy and Merry Christmas to those of you who are celebrating. The other day, Baggins made a video talking about the potential upcoming weapon options. In the video, he showed some of the old Lifestaff and Celestial Gauntlet abilities and talked about his potential thoughts on what the next weapon could be, suggesting it could either be the Celestial Gauntlet, a Mace, a one-handed mace maybe with a shield, or an arcane spellbook. When the devs started talking about this weapon, I had similar suggestions. I also thought that either the Celestial Gauntlet or the Mace seems most likely. The arcane spellbook is something I didn't have on my radar at the time, but it's also possible considering it was shown in one of the trailers. But the video and some of the old skills shown in the video actually made me remember something. A very long time ago, I came across some data mining of the old test phase files. This data mining contained the original abilities of the Lifestaff from the preview version of the game. The Celestial Gauntlet was actually in the game before the Lifestaff existed, and the Lifestaff was in a way a direct successor. If the information that I have is correct, then the abilities at the time on the Lifestaff were basically copied over from the Celestial Gauntlet minus some of the visual effects. This is also indicated by the fact that some of the abilities refer to arcane damage, and the Celestial Gauntlet dealt arcane damage, while the Lifestaff deals nature damage. The Lifestaff has been changed massively since, and all that remains from these original effects is basically one ability and two passives. But looking at these abilities now, I could see quite a few of them making a comeback for a new support weapon, and some of the passives as well, in one way or another. Baggins also found some clips demonstrating these old abilities, and I dug a little deeper and found some more, both showing other people using the Celestial Gauntlet directly, as well as more recent footage from the preview of people using the Lifestaff. All the sources in the description. Unfortunately, I could not find any footage where the recording player had the Celestial Gauntlet equipped themselves. Now, we need to establish a few things here. The devs have said that the next weapon will be a focus weapon, and it will be focused on healing, buffing, and for a support class in general. So we are very, very likely to expect something in the same vein as the Lifestaff. But we neither have a guarantee of any of the datamined abilities returning, nor that the weapon will be the Celestial Gauntlet. But what we do know is that they have no issue moving abilities from one weapon to another, as they did with the Celestial Gauntlet and the Lifestaff. So it's very possible that they may look at some of the abilities from back then, because some are very, very useful and not really in the game in that form yet, and place them on the new healing weapon no matter what type of weapon it is. There's nothing stopping them from using some of the abilities from the original Celestial Gauntlet on a Mace instead. The context in which the Celestial Gauntlet in particular would be interesting though is that it used to deal arcane damage. We currently don't have a weapon that deals arcane damage, so something filling that niche could be interesting. On the other hand, most players are not that concerned with damage coming from a healing weapon of any sort, a support weapon, and a Mace would also work because we don't really have much strike damage in the game either outside of the Warhammer. What is interesting is that you'll notice that there are relatively little similarities to the Lifestaff that we have now, whereas other weapon abilities didn't get significant changes to the same degree. For example, the Warhammer already had Clear Out, Shockwave, and Path of Destiny, and it was mostly the upgrades that were different and had different additional effects. So all in all, take all of this with a huge grain of salt. We may or may not see things from here in the future, but I want to talk about them in case we do, because I think they are interesting and some of them would actually be quite fun to have today. In this clip from Shaq News that Baggins found, we can actually see one of the abilities in action. Baggins speculates that this is what will later become Sacred Ground. If that is the case, this ability was likely Healing Wave. The description of Healing Wave is: target a location to channel a healing wave zone that delivers 15% healing to group members per second. Now, what we don't see in the clip is this spell being channeled. The spell's just cast and then it's on the ground. This may just be due to the early descriptions not being particularly good or fleshed out, or it could be that this is actually not quite the same version. A version of Sacred Ground that would require channeling seems pretty unthinkable these days, considering you would be such an easy target doing that. The first upgrade back then was Protector's Blessing. Significantly reduces the mana cost of the Healing Wave spell. The second upgrade was Karmic Concentration. Increased the cast distance of the Healing Wave spell by 10 meters. And the third upgrade was Peacemaker. Increased the power of the Healing Wave. These upgrades honestly were pretty boring and have nothing on the upgrades for Sacred Ground today, but a lot of the upgrades back then were fairly simple and were later overhauled. The second ability, Holy Shield, is very interesting. The description is: channel a stationary spell that creates a shield protecting everyone inside from projectile attacks. The first upgrade, Supreme Presence, increases the size of the shield by 100%. Holy Refugee reduces the mana cost of the Holy Shield by 50%. Now I'll be real with you, in its original form this spell would absolutely break the game nowadays. This channels for around 15 seconds. In a war you could just have two heavy healers with massive cooldown reduction purely focus on using this spell and just constantly shielding off the entire point that you're trying to capture, and it would be very, very unfun. But the general concept of a projectile shield or barrier of some form that requires some commitment, like channeling, is something that I think would be very healthy for New World. The limited counterplay, especially against long-range weapons, is something that a lot of players complain about, and this would be a potential response to that. However, to maintain balance, the amount of shots taken or damage taken would have to be capped in some form, and after that the shield would have to break. The third ability was internally labeled as Touch of Life, but was actually called Divine Embrace. However, it is very different from the Divine Embrace that we have now. What it shared with the Divine Embrace we have now is the targeting system. Target a location to cast a Holy Zone that will deliver an additional 40% damage reduction to any group members. 40% by itself is pretty insane. That is more than the Sword and Shield Capstone perk provides at the moment, and that one is only directly around the tank and not anywhere, unlike this Divine Embrace version. But it gets even more extreme. The first upgrade, Royal Privilege, reduced the mana cost of Divine Embrace, but the more important one, the second upgrade, is Light's Grace. This doubles the effectiveness of Divine Embrace. It doesn't specify in what way, but I'm guessing since it doesn't mention the time or anything, this is very likely the damage reduction itself. That would also mean that this damage reduction is likely a direct damage reduction and not a fortify, because otherwise you would overcap if it was 80% damage reduction. At this point you can pretty much make most of your group completely unkillable if it actually worked that way, so I can see why Divine Embrace was reworked to provide healing instead. Part of this is essentially on fortifying Sacred Ground now as well, so I don't see this particular spell returning in a similar form. It would just be overkill in combination with fortifying Sacred Ground, and even if we're talking about a melee Mace option, then it would probably be too strong in combination with the Sword and Shield Capstone. But as it's still the case today, the skill tree also has perks that are not tied to an ability. Aura of Protection increases the base health of all friendlies in a 10-meter radius by 10%. This seems extremely high and I don't really see that coming back. Mana Flow regenerates mana when you successfully hit enemies with any spell. Not particularly interesting, but could be re-added for a mana-intense weapon. Ancient Guardian is very interesting. When health drops below 20%, a shield activates to prevent damage for a short amount of time. May only occur once every 15 minutes. Long cooldowns like that are pretty much unheard of today, so I don't think we'd have a 15-minute version of this, but I could see a very short shield at a certain health threshold being a thing. Aura of Healing delivers health to friendlies within 10 meters of the caster every second. It activates when struck in battle and lasts for 20 seconds, has a 2-minute cooldown. Aura of Healing still exists today as Enchanted Justice, even though the numbers have been tweaked quite a lot, and especially the radius has been heavily reduced. Empowered Block increased your stamina regeneration when hit in battle by 25%, not particularly unique or interesting. The capstone was Mass Resurrection. When the Protector revives a player from Death Door, they call upon the guards to revive all friendlies from Death Door within a 15-meter radius. May only occur once every 15 minutes. I don't think this would ever come back. This doesn't even work in any mode where people cannot get downed anymore, so in that regard it's already pointless. A 15-meter radius also means that usually this won't have any impact, because usually people will not die that close to each other. So overall, just a very strong effect in very niche situations and otherwise fairly useless, especially with the super long cooldown. The other skill tree begins with the Siphon ability. Suck the life out of a single enemy while increasing your mana. Connect up to one friend to deliver powerful healing effects. This is a very unique ability that I could absolutely see coming back. A single target health drain or mana drain of some sort that then can also link to allies sounds very cool and is absolutely something that would enhance the healer experience, allowing them to deal a little bit more damage as well, while still being effective at healing their allies. Cosmic Connection increases the range of the Siphon projectile by 50%. Arcane Justice allows the caster to regenerate health as well as mana when siphoning enemies. Super Siphon drastically improves the speed of the Siphon spell and reduces enemy movement speed. It also protects up to one group member with 80% damage resistance. Maybe that last part especially is not gonna come back, because there's already another damage resistance here which I dismissed, and I don't think this one is any more balanced, especially because you're also healing at the same time, and you're healing yourself and you're dealing damage. But the base spell is most certainly interesting. Speed of Light is the reason why everyone ran Life Staff as a third weapon in the early test. Charge up and dart forward 10 meters, dealing damage to enemies in your path. It was similar to the Fire Staff dash, but I think it was a lot more spammable overall, because I saw people use it constantly. That's also because the upgrade Cosmic Shift allows you to dart forward an additional 5 meters, and Cosmic Shift allows you to dart forward an additional 10 meters, so this thing covered a lot of distance. I don't really know if I ever see anything like this coming back for a healing weapon, because the major concern would be providing a healer that can also use the Life Staff along with it, with a lot of mobility and more healing utility, which effectively means you get a very important component of the rapier as well as another healing weapon combined into one, and that might easily be overpowered. I'm more inclined to think that they will keep the mobility on healing and support focused weapons relatively low, because otherwise they would be very, very hard to balance. Smite targets a location to cast a powerful damaging spell. The empowered version, Empowered Smite, increases the spell power of Smite by 25%. Ultra Smite, yeah, that's really what the upgrade is called, increases the spell power of Smite by an additional 30%. While I could absolutely see a new support weapon having some form of damaging spell, I think the upgrades would not be as plain as Smite's. This one is just very, very basic, and I think there would be more enhanced effects to it. The next passive on this side is Arcane Might. This increases your damage while using the Life Staff by 10%. Now, it's weird that it says Arcane Might. This is likely a remnant from this originally being from the Celestial Gauntlet and dealing arcane damage then, because as far as I'm aware it wasn't arcane damage when it was on the Life Staff. Though looking back at some old footage from that time, the damage type wasn't indicated when attacking an enemy, so I couldn't actually find any information on if the Life Staff at some point actually had arcane damage as well. Either way, this was just a percentage damage increase anyways. The next perk, Arcane Rage, increases the damage by 50% when the health is less than 25%. Actually quite aggressive. Spirits United increases the mana regeneration for you and group members in a 10 meter radius by 5%. This one actually still exists today and is now 3%, so it's even worse and completely useless in the current meta. Soulsteel allowed you to regenerate health when killing an enemy. And Transcendence increased your movement speed by 50% while aiming your Life Staff. The Capstone, Resuscitate, allowed you to revive yourself from Death's Door, but only once every 15 minutes. All things considered, this could actually still work today. Instead of reviving yourself from Death's Door, you would simply revive yourself when you die, so that it would work in War or OPR as well. All in all, we have a ton of interesting abilities, some of which definitely have great potential to make a comeback. And talking about comebacks, there is also a perk in the game that might make a bit of a comeback. This is something we'll talk about in the next days, so if you'd like to see that, please consider subscribing and clicking the bell. By the way, there might be a few less videos in the next days because of the holidays. Thanks for watching, Duke Sloth, out.